Hello, everyone. This is the Cluster API Office Hour. Today is October the 5th. Before starting, a quick reminder that this meeting abides to the CNCF Code of Conduct, so be kind with each other. And if you have topic, you can add them to the meeting agenda. Let me share the document in chat. And in order to add an item to the agenda, you need to be subscribed to the SIG cluster lifecycle mailing list. And one last item, if you want to speak, please use the raise hand feature that you can find in Zoom. So let's get this started. So first of all, at the beginning of every meeting, we usually welcome new attendees. So I will shut up for a few seconds and let people to chime in and introduce themselves. Okay, it seems that there are no new attendees today. If someone wanted to introduce themselves also later, feel free to do it. Okay, moving on, open proposal readout. So is there some update about new proposal? I see Stefan with the hands raised. Please, Stefan.
Yep, just Guillermo couldn't join, so he was asking on his PR for the HTMs from everyone, like we suggested. He got HTMs, and I think we should start the lazy consensus now and set a date.
I kind of agree. This is what we discussed the last week. So what is a good date for lazy consensus? Next week, before next office hour?
Sounds fine to me.
Okay, so is discussed in October 5th of this hour, and the consensus expires next week, which is the 12th. About that one. Okay. I also have an update with regards to open proposals. So I'm continuing to work on the topic of label sync. Last week, I introduced the first breakdown of this work, that is the PR. That is a proposal that documents how we plan to do label sync between machine and underlying Kubernetes nodes. This week, I started a new WIP proposal. It is still work in progress, but I'm getting there. That basically tackles the problem of in-place propagation of changes affecting Kubernetes object only. Why I'm not talking about labels? It is documented in the proposal itself, but basically we have other information like I don't know, not dry timeout that flow down our chain, and basically those information like labels and annotation do not impact the machine, the actual machine itself. And so the idea is to use the same mechanism of in-place propagation to avoid unnecessary rollouts. If you are interested in this discussion, please take a look at this proposal. Okay, so if there are no questions, we can move to discussion topics. Stefan, Cecile, the first one is yours.
Yep. I think I would take over the screen share. If you give me the rights.
So sharing, Stefan, make co-host. You should get our.
Yep.
Okay, and I stop sharing.
Perfect. Okay, that should work. Yep. Okay. 1 second. Okay, I think the format should also be kind of working now. Okay, so Cecile and I were discussing how to move forward with the release team. And we have a first proposal for essentially the next 2 release dates. And yeah, how the release cycle itself would work. Yeah, also discuss it with Fabrizio. So what I would do is essentially I would show the picture and then just go through it. I think based on a 1.3 example, maybe just how I think that could work. Cecilia and Fabrizio, please correct me if I'm misrepresenting something. Okay, just have to open the notes on this side. Okay, so we are currently in the 1.2 release cycle, of course, somewhere September, October. And we are still just only churning out essentially patch releases here. So we define the release cycle more or less like Kubernetes. So release cycle means starting from the point where we start working on the release. So when we release the previous release, so here we released 1.2, we start with the release cycle of 1.3. And the release cycle essentially goes until we do the 1.3.0 release. That's not super visible here, but we put it somewhere in the docs. So essentially just from when we start to work on it until we have the minor release. That's what release cycle itself is. For 1.3 and 1.4, that would be each roughly 4 months. And the idea is to have the next 1.3 release end of November and the 1.4 release end of March. I added those all to the meeting notes. Then regarding alpha, beta, RC releases, the idea is that in the first 3 months of the release, we can essentially create alpha releases on demand. So if there is a reason to already have an alpha release, so that it's easier for someone to pick up, we can do alpha releases in that phase. Maybe I should make it a little bigger. But we usually always have also have nightly releases every day. They're currently broken. So yeah, but once you have the nightlies fixed, I'm not sure if we actually did alpha releases, but we could have them. Then 4 weeks before the release, we start creating beta releases. So those are just those 2 weeks. Let's see. The idea is to have them as a preview, more or less, so folks can already start adopting. It's not necessarily feature complete at this point, but it should be already very stable. And it can be definitely used for testing, etc., just to already get the providers working with next cluster API release. The idea is that from this point forward, every change that we would want to merge that would break providers has to be discussed and approved in the office hours. So just, yeah, essentially the idea is if we have things that affect providers, we should merge them in the beginning of the release cycle. And if you have something that really has to be merged after we start with betas, we have to essentially discuss and approve it. Otherwise, it won't be merged into this release. Of course, it can be merged into the next release, but otherwise, we already have like provider breaking changes, code freeze here. Then after 2 weeks of betas, we start with release candidates, and that's also the time where we create a release branch. So 2 weeks before the release, we create a new release branch. We have feature freeze, feature or code freeze. We didn't make a difference. Essentially means the only things that are allowed to merge are bug fixes, test improvements, test fixes, documentation, but nothing else. And yeah, and then we have those 2 weeks where the main goal is just stabilizing the release until the minor release. And from this point forward, we can already start merging things again, breaking stuff, etc. on main, which are then part of the next release 1.4. So just have to check if I missed one of the important points. Yeah. So main goal is definitely to have a predictable release cadence to allow providers to plan on top of that, so that when people know, hey, here in November or in March, the next cluster API release is coming, they can already kind of include that in the provider minor release planning. And ideally, we can shorten the time period between the cluster API release and the provider release, because the cluster API is only actually really useful to users if we also have info providers supporting the new cluster API release, and it's not like, I don't know, 2 or 3 months time between those releases. Yeah, I think those are the main points that we want to propose. I don't know, maybe for now, just general comments. Cecile, Fabrizio, did I miss something important?
No, I think that was great. I think the only thing I'll add is like, this is kind of a attempt to like structure a little bit for the next 2 releases, just so we have dates in mind to plan for the release team. But I think the plan is not to like say, this is the release cadence we're going to adopt forever. Like, I think we want to reevaluate at the end of release 1.4 and see how that went and what we want the cadence to be for 1.5.
Sounds good.
Great. Thank you, Stefan and Cecile, for the clarification. Any comments?
What I would do as the next step is essentially put that into, or let's say, I'll take a look at our documentation. I'll see where it fits. I think it would be good, definitely for now, to have that picture there. We have to decide going forward if we want to maintain it or not. I think it's a good overview. And yeah, of course, also the other the things I just mentioned, like 4 weeks before release, we're doing that, 2 weeks before we're doing that. I would put it all into the documentation. Then we can also do a round of reviews on top of that, based on that PR. But if there are then still no concerns, then we would just go ahead with that plan.
Okay, I've seen someone making congratulations on using the reaction in Zoom. Mike is writing that everything sounds good, and thank you for their work, which is something that I echo. And so, in my opinion, I already discussed this before, and I think that is a good step in the right direction. And as Cecile said, we have to start somewhere, and let's iterate in future if we find out that this can be improved. So thank you, Stefan and Cecile, for driving this.
Okay, then I would say next topic, Cecile, with the second half.
Cecile raised that.
Yes. Do you mind sharing screen again, Fabrizio, so I can talk for my notes?
Yeah, I just dropped the share. So Fabrizio, can you share again?
Yes.
Great. So now that we have kind of better idea of dates for the upcoming 2 releases, another reason why also we wanted to kind of plan for like a 1.4 start is so that we can plan ahead and start forming a first release team. So do you mind going back to the Google Doc, Fabrizio, please? Thanks. Yeah, just at the bottom right there. Yeah. So we had some, like, I think a lot of people volunteered last time when we first brought it up, but the plans were kind of still a little vague. Now that we have a better idea of exactly what the release team is going to do and for how long, we would like to call for volunteers again for the first cycle. So the idea is that I will be looking for 1 person to fill each role that is defined in that document right there. If you can click on it, Fabrizio, please. So essentially, we're looking for 1 person to be release lead for 1.4, 1 person to be communications docs release notes manager, 1 person to be CI signal bug triage automation manager, and then up to or around 3 shadows, so maybe 1 shadow for each role. And so ideally, the people who will be taking on these roles, they don't need to be maintainers of cluster API or reviewers, but ideally you're already a Kubernetes SIG member. So you have basic permissions to do things like triage issues. Ideally, you're already a contributor of cluster API and you're somewhat familiar with the project. This is for the first time, just so that this is a smooth process, since like it's the first time we'll be doing this, and we just want to make sure that people are kind of already aware of the basics and they can help also define the process itself. We're trying to have a good company representation. So if we can try to do 3 different companies, that would be awesome. And what else did I write down? If you have experience releasing an open source project, that's a plus. It doesn't have to be CAPI. It could be any project. If you're experienced with doing a GitHub release and know how that works, that would be awesome. Going to try to figure this out before KubeCon. So in the next 2 weeks, if you're interested, or if you just want to discuss to know more, please, or if you're like hesitant or have any questions, please reach out to me on Slack, or Stefan or Fabrizio, or any of the maintainers will be happy to help. And we can talk and see if this is a good fit. So just to clarify, this is for 1.4.0 release cycle only, not forever. So this is a very defined period of 4 months that goes from, if you scroll back to the diagram that Stefan had, that is from approximately December 1st to April 1st. Yeah. So that is when we'd be looking at, I think, did we say December 15th?
That was not our final state.
Okay. So I guess somewhere around beginning of December to beginning of April is what you should be looking at in terms of time commitment. And then this isn't going to be like a full-time job or anything like that, where you need to like put your other duties on hold and just do this for 6 months or 4 months. It's more like a few hours a week kind of thing. And we're kind of defining this as we go. Again, this is the first time we're doing this. So you'll also help us learn from the process and iterate for next time. Does that, Stefan, do you have anything to add to that? Did I kind of cover all the points?
Yeah, just one comment. What we're planning to do until let's say until beginning of December is just to improve the current state a little bit, in the sense of that we have more documentation about what to actually do than we have today. But yeah, that's a little bit work in progress. So it's not like, hey, we're just saying, please do that stuff, and then you have no idea what to do. We really aim for having basic documentation about how we currently do those releases and what you would have to do during those 4 months, so that you don't have to start from scratch, essentially.
Yes, and the other point also that reminds me is Stefan and I are also going to be there as shadows and to help out the first release team. So at first we thought of like whether we should be the first release team, but then we figured that if we're doing it ourselves, it might not help us improve the process in a way that is like more inclusive to everyone who's not a maintainer. And so we want to make sure that we're there available to help, but also learning from watching someone else go through it the first time. So we're going to be around, we're going to be part of the release team, but we're not going to be the primary role owners, just because we want to give someone else the chance to go through it and learn from that.
Mike?
Yeah, I just wanted, I don't know if we've done this already or not before, but I'm wondering, like, since we're kind of like rolling up to this for the first time, would it, you know, like thinking about the shadowing and whatnot, would it make sense to kind of like make a video recording of doing this one time so that we could maybe share the recording as extra material?
This could be an idea. Honestly, we are still figuring out how to write the documentation or how to pass knowledge. But yeah, these are a good suggestion. Cecile?
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, Mike, especially for the like actual like cutting the release part where like we go through like the automation steps. I think that would be a good one to have. That can be something that we do in the next month and have, like Stefan was saying, like I think the next month we're going to focus on like building up our docs so that the people who do this aren't lost and have some documentation to start.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I was just thinking, I was kind of imagining like if we get the shadow and the release person together and like you're probably going to be you know, doing a video chat anyways as you do this. Yeah, it might be easy to pick it up or something. So anyways, yeah, cool. I'm happy to hear it.
Great, thank you, Mike. Some other question, concern about this topic? Okay, great. Next one in the agenda is Stefan.
Yep. So first of all, thanks Lubomir for always keeping us up to date on new stuff in QADM. So Lubomir started RFE HackMD for etcd learner mode, and I just wanted to essentially surface it here if people are interested to please take a look and give feedback. So there's this HackMD, the corresponding QADM issue, and we also have a cluster API issue that is, I think, roughly related to learner mode. I don't know, Lubomir, if you want to say more, you're also here if you want to. But I think that's the main part.
Basically, we're looking for someone from cluster API or other areas of cluster lifecycle to potentially step in and help, because we are not really staffed to do this change in QADM. I managed to write a proposal with the idea to, how do I say, to explain how the difficulty aligns. But basically, if somebody is interested and wishes to improve this integrity of QADM around etcd, please step in.
You see?
Yeah, and I think like +1 to this, I think basically like this is also affecting stuff like cap fee. So it's definitely like or any other on-prem provider, for example, using kubeVips as a load balancer. So there's like issues that comes up also during bootstrapping because of leader elections. So yeah, I think this is definitely for the better for cluster API in general.
Yeah, I agree. This is an option to give to have better stability on the join process, especially on machine with slow disk or poor network performance. And so this change is important for cluster API. We should help as much as possible. And also I'm seeing that in the document, there is the idea to have this behind the feature gate. And so this will kind of let us to experiment and see how it works in reality progressively, which sounds great. So thank you very much, Lubomir, for giving another push to this idea. Okay, is there some more question, concern about TCD learner mode in kubeadmin and in cluster API? Seems not. Okay, let's move on. Stefan again.
Yep. So can you open that link?
Sure.
Oh yeah, that's already linked for the pull request. Okay, so just some context. So today, when we look at the taints field that we have in our kubeadm config, that's the third code snippet. Essentially, our documentation says that you can either set the taint field not at all in cluster API, which means kubeadm just does its default thing. Then it says you can set an empty slice, which means there should be no taints on the control plane machine. Or you just set a list of taints and then you get a list of taints. The problem is that the case where you can set an empty slice just doesn't work today with our API. The problem is running through our webhooks and also I think through our Bootstrap controller. We're doing a lot of JSON marshalling and unmarshalling. And because we're using omit empty on the taints field, the JSON marshalling doesn't differentiate between the slice being set to nil or the slice being set to an empty slice. So essentially, you are unable to set an empty slice, so you're unable to create a control plane without taints. The idea in this PR is to change our this API field to make this possible. So essentially, we just get one new additional behavior, which is you're now able to set an empty slice, which then results in a control plane without taints. And I mainly want to bring this up because it's a change to how we marshal this field. And if you consider this change something that we can do, I would also suggest to cherry pick it accordingly because it's essentially a bug fix to the field. So the question is, do you have a problem with that or not? Yeah, maybe the before after is an important thing, sorry. Essentially, I wrote down what the behavior before and after this PR is. So before this PR, if the slice is null, it's not marshaled in JSON. If it's an empty slice, it's not marshaled in JSON, so we can differentiate. And if you have an array, then you just get an array. And afterwards, the first two cases change. So if the slice is null, you will get it as null in YAML. And if it's an empty slice, then it just stays an empty slice. Yeah, so yeah, just asking for feedback essentially.
Is there? Yes, I see Yassine giving a +1. I'm +1. We fixed this in Kubernetes some time ago, and yeah, it is nice that we can find a way to fix this in Capi as well. There is also an issue about this, if I remember well. So
yes,
it
there
is
are a bit
definitely
more details what exact issues with JSON marshalling, and it comes down to the way that the Go SDK JSON.marshal function works.
okay. Florian.
Hey, yeah, I just wonder, do we need to consider backwards compatibility here? Because as far as I understand, if a user sets explicitly an empty slice, then at the moment they would get the default taints, and in the future they would get no taints. Is that a concern here?
Good question. Essentially, the behavior would definitely change. Although that behavior is based on the Go doc that we have clearly a bug. So good question, but yeah.
Does
I would probably say it should be fine, as especially because we explicitly wrote it down in the Go doc and also in the Open API schema that what the behavior should be, and it's just not that.
Right, sounds good to me.
Yeah, so I just hope the benefit of making that behavior possible and bug-free outweighs the cases where someone did set an empty slice and then later on didn't really notice that that doesn't work, and now it suddenly starts working.
Is there someone else that want to comment? Okay, so thank you, Florian, for the clarification. And Stefan for answering. So I kind of agree. I think that this is a benefit. Nevertheless, if we get this merger, when we get this merger, we have to document this properly in the release notes. So this is not surprising for people. Okay, let's go back to the agenda. So it seems that we are already at the end of the agenda. So if there is no last minute comments, let me check this chart. Okay, so so it seems that there are people that are interested to this fix because they are working around these in strange ways. So this will help users. So if there are no other issues, no last second issues, we can get some time back today. Let's call it once, 2, 3 times. Have a nice day, everyone. See you.
Thanks, Fabrizio. Later.